So that should be starting sometime soon. Just trying to log in a minute early to give everybody a chance to hop on and to get myself sorted. So I'm just filling the void with noise because that's all how it goes. Okay, cool. So that is set up. So I'm going to give that a second for people to hop on. If you're already on, hello, welcome. And I'm also just trying to make sure I'm sorted as well. So we'll start at 8:30 like we usually do, but just giving it that minute. If anybody is listening at this point in time, depending on when they log on as well, Happy New Year! We're still in the month of January for 2024, which is always exciting. Hopefully the year has been kind to you so far. If it hasn't, may the roughest part of the year be now so you can enjoy the rest of it without too many problems. But I mean, we'll kind of just see how it goes, right? All right. Okay. So we're at 8:30. So good morning. Thanks for popping in. I appreciate it. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Okay. Let me try that again. It's one of those days where new year, new start, but that doesn't mean I have my life together. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Jolene. I'm a certified songbird feeding specialist, and today we are discussing Juncos. And I'm a certified songbird feeding specialist with Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord. We're going to be all out of order this morning, apparently. So I hope you guys are ready to talk about Juncos. They are a bird that we get primarily in the winter time. So as the temperature has certainly gotten colder outside, you might have seen these birds popping up around your yard. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you have any questions, feel free to make a comment and I'll try and answer that when I can. So, of course, we talk about some of my favorite information first. These guys are from the order Passeriformes still, so along with all of our other perching songbirds, which is most of who we talk about, but more specifically, they're in the family Passerellidae, which includes all of our New World sparrows and towhees. New World just really consists of North America and South America for that scientific family name. Oh, somebody's got Juncos now. That's perfect. These birds are actually one of the most common birds to be found in North America, which may seem strange, even though we only get them during a small portion of the year. But it's estimated to be around 630 million individuals, which is quite a lot of birds. So, yes, good morning, guys. I love it. So, especially in the wintertime, it's estimated that you can find Juncos at 80% of people that bird feed. So they're usually there's 80% of feeders host Juncos during the winter time, so there's quite a few out there as well too. In regards to their habitat, these birds prefer a much more coniferous forest, so think about your pines, firs, and cedars, but they will sometimes take a mixed forest with deciduous trees as long as it contains those coniferous trees as well. And again, they expand that range in the wintertime and they start to care less about the specific kind of trees as well. So we'll talk about their migration range in just a second as well too. Man, good morning, guys. You guys are so great, which is great because my words are all over the place. I apologize. So when it comes to the oldest Junco on record, in regards to the dark-eyed Junco, thanks to banding practices, the oldest individual they've come across was 11 years and 4 months old, but their average lifespan can be anywhere from around 3 to 5 years. So really it just depends on how well they do in the wild as well. So when we talk about migration, dark-eyed Juncos actually have the nickname snowbirds. So if you know any of your relatives, or maybe you yourself or any friends that have a tendency to travel between northern and southern locations to avoid that cold temperature, they actually have a friend in the Junco. So that's one of the reasons that Juncos are nicknamed snowbirds, is because they do avoid the cold weather whenever possible, but they do make quite the trip to avoid it. So when we look at the map here, the purple range is where they are found year-round. So you can find them both on the west coast and the eastern section of North America. They actually do come down into the year-round range in North Carolina in the Appalachian Mountains because that is at a higher elevation. The orange kind of section here that travels all the way up in Alaska and all the way through Canada here is their nesting range and where you can find them in the summertime. So when the temperatures are warmer, they have no problem pushing up that far north. But as it starts to get colder and we shift into that winter season, they start to push further south. So this blue area that you find all throughout the U.S. from coast to coast is where you can find the Juncos in the winter time. So they definitely expand their range depending on the season as well too, which is really crazy. When these birds do migrate, they are solitary migrants, so they actually don't really travel in large flocks. And they have a tendency to migrate at low altitudes at night. So they are actually, it's very common for them to suffer from building collisions, which is why in migration season, it's so important to have like certain lights out campaigns, especially in big cities, to reduce these types of collisions from happening as well too. Something that is interesting as well is when it comes to their wintering habitat. Juncos actually use the same 10-acre area each winter, and the same thing happens with their nesting season. So they like to visit the same spots consistently. So on a yearly basis, you probably are seeing this another Junco that you saw last year as well too, which is fun. But the males have a tendency to winter farther north than the females. So in an attempt to give an extreme example of that, let's say you have a male and a female pair up in Canada and they're migrating south for the winter. What'll happen is you might have your male winter somewhere over here while your female might go farther south. The reason for this is because the males are ready to make a mad dash back to their nesting habitat when that season comes back around. Oftentimes, first year males don't winter as farther north as experienced males because they aren't used to the mad dash that takes place as well too. So it's really interesting how they kind of strategize that as well. Oftentimes, though, when they do come back to their wintering habitat, they do winter in flocks together, even if they don't travel at the same time to get there. And they can range in flocks of around 6 to 30 individuals. So it's not uncommon to find more than one junco in your yard if you are seeing them in the area. So when it comes to identification, their shape and size is pretty straightforward, which is really nice. So they are a medium-sized sparrow. So if you're used to like your house sparrows or anything like that, they're of a similar size. A little bit, and another bird that you might be familiar with. So a little bit larger than a chickadee, but not too much crazy larger after that. Forgive me, my words are gone today. So go January! When it comes to overall shape, though, their head is more of a round shape. They don't have too much of a really defined neck, and they also have a stout beak, which is really specific as well. Compared to their body size, they do have a longer tail, so you can kind of flip that back and see it is pretty long in comparison. It's not super short and is kind of square. With their colorations, the males do have a tendency to have sharper markings than the females. Females might be a little bit more duller in color, a little bit more buff in coloration as well. They do have a lighter colored beak, so that is a really big giveaway against like a contrast of darker feathers. And on their tails, on the outer tails, they actually have white tail feathers. So usually they have like kind of two tail feathers on the outside that are white, while all the other ones are more of that darker coloration. Now, they do have a specific song and call, but keep in mind, for those of us that only get them in the wintertime, chances are we won't hear their song. Songs are used by a lot of birds in order to defend territory and to attract a potential mate, while calls are used year-round for communication and defense as well too. So like just kind of defending that territory as well. So slightly different style. But for the song, these birds do have, it's basically a trill of 7 to 23 notes. Same pitch, just a very fast pace. So here is what that one would sound like as well too. Hopefully you guys are hearing that all right. And you can see how fast and rapid that movement is when they sing. And I'll play it one more time for you as well. So that is the song. Usually it's produced by the males to defend territory as well too. And then with the call, it's a little bit different. So of course these birds do have kind of that standard short chip, which is very hard to identify amongst species. But other than that, they also have a type of like raspy, like cue call, which I don't know why I bother trying to make it, but we're going to say it anyways. And this is what that one sounds like as well. I'm going to go ahead and play it one more time. So definitely that raspy kind of cue is a very specific noise that makes it a little bit easier to identify in the wintertime as well. So keep an eye out for that. And I will play it once more for good measure. So definitely a fun one to keep an ear out for, especially in the wintertime as well too. Now, one thing that you may notice throughout the presentation is I do always try and list even if we talk only about one species of bird, I do try and list the name under each photo and of course who took it. But you'll notice that in parentheses I have slate colored with the junco, and that is because juncos have gone through quite the phases of trying to nail down different types of names and species and everything like that. So these birds are actually very well known for having different geographical variants. And what that means is that there's more than one type of dark-eyed junco. So these birds are all the same species, but they look a little bit different. So they have kind of a maybe a subspecies or just a different type of name with that as well too. Geographical variants often occur, and again, because the dark-eyed junco has such a wide range all over North America, there's bound to be different types of geographical barriers, whether that's rivers or mountains or anything like that, altitude changes and things that they prefer. Over time, it's not uncommon for certain birds to have different types of characteristics. So these birds are all dark-eyed juncos, but depending on where you live, you might see a slightly different one. For those of us in North Carolina, I'm going to go back up, this slate-colored junco is the one that we're going to see most of the time. But if you go out west, whether it's Midwest or kind of further out, chances are you'll see a lot of the Oregon dark-eyed junco, which is this guy here. So keep in mind, and of course you've got smaller sets of different types, like the white-sided or the pink-sided, and there's a few more on another slide I'll show as well too. But keep in mind, all of these birds have that same type of head shape, the beak shape, and they all have a light colored beak as well too. So again, depends on location of where you are in North America too, but I think it's always really fun to point out. There's been, I think, 15 different variants that have been identified, and actually 5 or 6 of these used to be registered as a completely separate species from the dark-eyed junco. But in, I think, the 70s or 80s, they decided to kind of group all of these birds together under the dark-eyed junco because they shared a lot of similarities, even though there were some differences. So there's always differences and changes coming up in the bird species and how we categorize them as well. So these are just a few other styles of dark-eyed juncos here, and then I just wanted to point out they do look very similar to a separate species of juncos that can be found more in Mexico and a little bit of some of the southern states that we have, called the yellow-eyed junco as well too. But again, you've got that lighter beak, same head shape, and again, the feathers do look different, although these birds are also gray, so you kind of have that to work with, but definitely kind of keeping that in mind can be helpful for identification in the future. One other thing I like to talk about, since juncos go all over the place with different types of variants, is the fact that there can be hybrids that occur naturally in the wild as well too. So dark-eyed juncos have been known to hybridize with a few different birds, one of which is the white-throated sparrow that we do get in the wintertime as well too. Now hybrids are pretty uncommon, so like maybe 10% of birds are actually do mix up with hybrids. But it is interesting to know about, right? So hybrids only occur with species that are closely related. In this case, juncos and the white-throated sparrows are all in the same scientific family. So it's not unsurprising that this was a case. But usually when they do have any offspring, those offspring have a strong familial resemblance with both parents. So on this left side, we have a picture of the white-throated sparrow, who has, of course, that white throat, some brown wing feathers, and some little yellow eyebrows here. And then on the right side, we have a hybrid of both species. In this case, you have, of the slate-colored junco at least, you have a lot of those gray feathers, that white belly, and then with the white-throated sparrow, you've got that white throat, a little bit of an eyebrow patch here, and those brown wings. Now, it can vary on individual what these birds look like of the hybrids, but they also do have a tendency to have like a song mashup or things as well too. So it's really interesting just to kind of point that out. Not super common, but it does happen. So you never know who you're looking at out when you're bird watching as well too. So when it comes to their diet, these birds are often ground foragers. However, sometimes with your males, because they do have a tendency to defend their territory from higher perches, they might find food by gleaning the underside of leaves, while others, when they're foraging on the ground, will kind of have a lot of scratching behaviors. So what that looks like is this right here. So basically they'll move both of their feet together at the same time to remove any leaf litter or check underneath it to expose any possible food options that they might be foraging for. So this is a common behavior amongst a lot of ground feeders as well too. So if you ever see this happening, it's because they're searching for like different types of food as well too, which is fun. So just keep an eye out if you ever see these birds foraging, because you never, it's fun to watch those behaviors, I find, a lot of the time. Now, most of the time, these birds are primarily seed eaters. That is a heavy part of their diet. However, when it comes to nesting season, like a lot of other birds, they do have a tendency to focus on more insect food options because that has more protein, which is better for that time of year, and also with like feather development and things like that as well too. One other thing that I find interesting is oftentimes if you feed birds in your yard, one of the things that we talk about is the fact that black oil sunflower is a very good general base to attract like a good portion of birds, but it's not always everyone's favorite. In this case, with the dark-eyed junco as well, these birds can crack open black oil sunflower, but it does take them a little bit more time. So he's trying to fiddle with opening that shell, and it takes a bit longer, right? So black oil sunflower for a dark-eyed junco is actually not their favorite food. These birds are much more interested in white millet or smaller types of seed options. The reason for this is just because it's easier to crack open, and they don't have much patience with trying to crack open a black oil sunflower. So in some cases for dark-eyed juncos, even though a piece of white millet does not have as much basically energy content or food resource as a black oil sunflower would, they would have no problem eating more of the white millet at a time to gain that same amount of energy as a black oil sunflower. So birds have different types of strategies for eating. So having different varieties of food or plants in your yard will help support a different variety of birds as well too, which is really fun. So even though a lot of birds can eat the same foods, doesn't mean they will. They all have specific preferences that they enjoy. And hopefully that made sense. It's just like a little thing I like to point out. So when it comes to courtship, again, for those of us in the Piedmont area of North Carolina, we're not going to see a lot of this behavior. But if you're up in the mountains, you can definitely get some eyes on this as well too. But usually, like I mentioned, in the wintertime, the males winter farther north. When the seasons shift, these guys are the first to dash back to their nesting territory, and they often occupy the territory from the previous year. So again, they like that kind of consistency. A lot of first-year males that haven't gotten a nesting territory before will often take over the territory of other males that did not come back as well too. So it kind of shuffles around a little bit as well. Oftentimes they sing to defend their territory, so again, we won't really hear that here, but you can definitely hear it there as well. And when they are trying to attract a potential mate, a lot of that courtship does rely on their tail feathers. So these birds happen to fan out their wings and their tail, and they'll kind of like fan and flick both to kind of show them off. And through studies, they found that the females prefer the males with more white in their tail as well too. So that's kind of what they're focusing on as well. Goodness. So when it comes down to nesting season as well, these birds are kind of more of a social monogamy, so they remain paired through that nesting season, but they don't, oh my goodness, they don't make any they don't mate for life or anything like that. Usually they stay through the one season. They might get back together the next season, but overall they usually pick a different mate each season as well too. When they have paired off, the female picks the nest site in the territory and she starts building. Oftentimes the male also displays with nesting material, but the female has a tendency not to use what he offers as well. She just kind of leaves him to it and then just kind of picks her own material to use. Usually when she sets up the nest, she can actually do anything from a ground nest to something in a low shrub or even in a crevice in a rock wall as well too. So she picks a lot of different areas to go from as well. But every time that she does, she's going to make a cup nest of some kind. So she'll usually use grasses, ferns, hair, or moss, a lot of softer, kind of thinner material, and kind of work on the outside first, kind of weaving all of those strands through, and then kind of using her body to shape the inside of the nest as well. Depending on where she builds it, it can take anywhere from 3 days to a week to finish the nest as well. When they do start nesting in the season, they can have anywhere from 1 to 3 broods. Oftentimes, the pairs that migrate first, end their nesting season first because they've already gotten started earlier on. But it can be anywhere from kind of March to July to the beginning of August is their kind of nesting season. But they can have anywhere from 1 to 3 broods with 3 to 6 eggs. Again, just kind of varies. Usually the nests that are kind of ground nests or in shrub nests can be more susceptible to predators. So the more eggs that they can lay at a time kind of increases that chance of survival as well too. Incubation period takes about 12 to 13 days, so a little less than 2 weeks. And nesting, so after the eggs hatch, they are all terrestrial young, so they are naked, blind, defenseless. They require the parents' care to stay warm and to get food. So that nesting period where they start to grow and develop their feathers takes anywhere from 10 to 13 days. So again, a little less than 4 weeks. So you can have anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks before these birds have completely fledged the nest as well too. When you have your fledgling dark-eyed juncos, they do look different from the parents. You'll notice that they don't have their darker feather coloration yet. There's a lot of brown kind of striping because, again, they don't want to be noticed in the nest too soon. So having a more subtle coloration can kind of help them hide as well too. You can see that there is a little bit more yellow on the side of the beak as well because they're still kind of finishing, kind of developing that as well. And you can see on the little back here, you see those white tail feathers I've been talking about this entire time. So they're just on the edges, and they really stand out with these birds as well too, which is really fun. So oftentimes when they fledge, they do hang out with the parents just for a little bit longer until they've completely developed as well too. And then from there, they do kind of go off on their own. And I'll go ahead and play that one more time, why not? Oftentimes before they migrate back, a lot of your males that have finished developing will kind of take a look at the area and get used to the locations that are available so that they can come back and kind of check that for potential nesting territory the next season as well. So it's in that period, that first year period, that they start to get all of their adult feathers too. So when it comes to attracting these birds to the feeders, sometimes you don't need to do much because, again, with that wide range that they migrate to in the wintertime, half the time you'll see them in your yard just kind of flicking through leaf litter or getting small seeds on the ground regardless. But if you want to attract them to the feeders, keep in mind these birds are often found to be ground feeders. They are smaller, so they have no problem perching on smaller types of perches. But having something that's a little bit more stable that they can feed forward with can be pretty helpful too. So hopper feeders that are shaped like houses have usually good support for them as well. Tube feeders, occasionally with a tray, again provide more support and they can kind of go from the tray there. A standard tray feeder is great because tray feeders are fantastic. Essentially, you can just kind of hang it up wherever and they bring all of your ground feeding birds up to eye level in that tray feeder. So you get a really good look at who's potentially on the ground that you might have been missing before. And if you don't really want to use a feeder, feel free to scatter the seed on the ground. These birds will absolutely take advantage of anything that you offer in any of those locations as well. So it can be fun to see them initiate those like general behaviors that they would do for food that would already be there as well. So in regards to foods that they enjoy, of course, we talked about white millet. That's just something easy for them to crack open and take. So that is definitely a great option for this time of year. It's also popular with doves or towhees as well. White millet is very high in carbohydrates, which can still be good for this time of year too. It may not be the fatty food that you think of, but it definitely covers the mix for other species of birds. The deluxe blend that we carry has a mix of sunflower, safflower, and white millet, so it caters to a lot of the birds you would really enjoy that would focus on the sunflower, so chickadees, titmice, nuthatches, while still offering something for your ground feeding birds as well. Oftentimes, white millet does get kicked out of the feeder, so for those of you that like a cleaner yard, keep that in mind. And if you don't like having any shells or possible sprouting occur, then using just sunflower chips, which is deshelled sunflower, is also a good in-between. Juncos may not like cracking open the shell of sunflower, but that doesn't mean they won't take advantage of a good sunflower heart or a sunflower chip as well too. So those are all great options to offer the Juncos this winter season as well. And then just in general, like while we don't get too much snow, we have been getting some rain and it has been hitting some freezing temperatures. So having feeders with decent weather guards as well, or just a decent roof, kind of helps provide some cover for that food. keeps it non-frozen and easier for the birds to access as well too during the winter season as well. So keeping that in mind can also be very helpful for this time of year. With that being said, as I've fumbled my way through that presentation, for those of you that are coming in the store today, feel free to use a $5 off a $25 purchase of more. The coupon code is Junco. It's only available today, either in store or through the phone orders as well. We will have a second viewing of this presentation in store at 11, so if you know anybody in the area that might be interested in this as well, feel free to send it this way. And once again, once again, too, I've got all the resources here as well. If you have any interest in checking out any of the pictures, videos, or audio that I've kind of mentioned as well, too, Macaulay Library at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is a great scientific archive that allows you to look through many different videos and photos and audio that people have uploaded themselves to get a better idea on how certain species behave or sound or look like as well, too. So definitely check that out as well. So thank you guys so much again for tuning in. I really always appreciate it. And of course, if you didn't hear me the first time, because I said it early, have a very happy new year. Best of luck with it. I hope it's treating you well so far. And if not, I hope the rest of the year goes much better as well too. So thank you guys so much again. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.